driven by Service Chevrolet Cadillac.
At 7:12, good morning. Oh, gosh, I got to turn myself down over here. I never sit
in that chair.
Down here.
I know, it's weird,
You're
right?
definitely in first class in this studio. We're in the back.
all four of them in coach, and I'm in first class.
We're in the baggage hold. Carol Ross is here. Warren Cottle is here. And welcome to Stafford Barnett. Good morning.
Welcome, Stafford.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Do not be shy.
Look, let's explain the rules right quick to Stafford.
Okay.
The ground rules are we're like the Supreme Court here. The newest member is responsible for bringing coffee to the rest of us.
I thought they didn't allow recording devices at the Supreme Court.
So we'll jump in. A lot has happened. You know, I like to send these topics and things that you've sent us over the week, you know, leading up to Wingin It Wednesday. But it's crazy. The news cycle just continues to change. And in between the time that I sent some topics yesterday, some other things changed. So I want to start with the story, just looking at the engagement we have. Over 80 people commenting kind of back and forth. Since we posted the story this morning about the Mouton statue downtown, some groups who want to get together. It's coming back into conversation. I knew it was just a matter of time with what we've seen in Charlottesville and some other places. Even though we haven't heard the conversation so much publicly, should the Mouton statue go, and what do these groups have to say? In honor of your first day with us here, Stafford, I'll let you go first, followed up by Miss Ross. Good morning.
Awesome. Thank you. So this Alfred Mouton statue thing, I think, is kind of it's a tricky subject. You know, we've got the Alfred Mouton house downtown, which is a museum, which is, you know, a large argument for where a lot of these statues belong, right? And there are people out there who are saying some pretty terrible things about Alfred Mouton. I'll be honest with you, I don't know enough about him to be able to back that up. But statues, by their nature, come down, and we don't see that because they generally have a long life before that happens. But if they didn't, we'd have statues of King George all up and down the eastern seaboard, and we know that after the Declaration of Independence was signed, New Yorkers tore down the statue of King George, melted it down, and made cannonballs to fight the British with. So you know, to say that there's no precedent for us removing statues is just historically inaccurate. You know, there are some people who feel that the existence of these statues, which a lot of these Civil War statues that went up 50 years after the end of the war. And if you ask, you know, General Lee, you know, if you look at what he wrote about it, he said that the statues were bad for reuniting the country, and it was something that he was opposed to. So, you know, there's some revisionist history that comes along with these statues, and I think that they belong in the museum. And people go, well, you're destroying history and you're getting rid of history. Well, and the good news is we still have books, right? So we're not burning books. We're just asking to move statues. And I think that moving it to the General Mouton house just makes sense.
Carol?
Except they don't want it there. They don't think it belongs there. And there's a covenant that I believe, I don't remember the organization. It might have been Daughters of the Confederacy or... No, Daughters of the American Revolution. I think it was one of those that historic organizations that put the covenant in there, and Lane Roy successfully defended that, and so that's why the issue went away when it did. Frankly,
because it's been a few years, right? I mean, several years since the last.
I would say about 2 years ago since the last uproar, and you knew it was going to come back. It's not going to go away. The narrative on this is really unfortunate, and all it does is serve to divide us. Yes, those statues represent a reprehensible era in our history. I don't know that they're teachable moments because people walk by them every day and don't pay any attention to them, and that is the problem with them. Nobody pays attention to them. Why now? Why has this become such a divisive issue? It's not doing anything to unite this country. I think that individual locations should be able to vote on it, but they didn't get to vote. The city council voted on it in New Orleans, but the people didn't get to vote on it. And the people didn't have any say, and it's causing a lot of problems in New Orleans right now, too. So I think if you're going to have a vote on this, let the people vote on it, not necessarily just their elected representatives. In terms of the statue, I'm a Yankee, you know. I was on the winning side. and you know, and I think it really is unfortunate to try to denigrate. Robert E. Lee was actually a rather admirable character in history, and I've gotten a history lesson on my show in the afternoon. I mean, growing up in Pennsylvania, you didn't get a great deep history lesson on Robert E. Lee. You knew about the Civil War and all the, all the usual stuff that you learn. But a lot of the folks who've really done a lot of studying on Robert E. Lee have a lot of very complimentary things to say about him, including the fact that apparently he was very much against secession. He did not want to fight a war over this. He was against slavery. His father owned slaves, and apparently he freed them, or the father freed them. According to several people who called into the show yesterday afternoon, he never owned slaves. And in Appomattox, instead of continuing to fight, which he could have done, if he had led the Army of the North, it might have been a different story. He was a brilliant general and continually beat the Union generals. But anyway, getting off track here, I think we ought to leave this alone in Lafayette, because I think it would be more divisive at this point in time to move the statue until there's more of a dialogue about it, and until there's a real understanding of what this will do. And again, the legal prohibitions.
Warren, is this just kind of where we're going? After what happened in Charlottesville, and we even heard a couple comparisons to George Washington and other figures. Is this just the direction we're going? We're going to see this in cities all over?
Yeah, this is the direction we're going for the time being. I don't know. This is the crisis du jour, and we don't know how much longer it's going to last. There'll be something else that'll come along and eclipse that. We thought maybe the moon and the sun would have taken care of it the other day, but it didn't. But back with the Alfred Mouton statue, the problem with that deal is that statue was erected on private property. There was a covenant in that deed, and that those covenants in those deeds, they stand in perpetuity. That's the whole purpose of putting them in there. If you sell a piece of property, you can put a covenant in there that says there can never be alcohol sold on this property. And it's going to stay that way from now on until you get a court that will decide that is not what they meant. When they said alcohol, well, they didn't understand that would encompass champagne and wine. They meant it was moonshine or something. But anyway, that when the city bought that property, it was not erected on public property. When the city bought it, that covenant went with that deed. The city bought it with that covenant, or the parish or whoever bought it. And so, until you get that turned over, then it's a moot point. Now, the people bring up all these good points in their favor about why it should be removed. That he was a general in the Civil War. When a general in the Civil War meant that your family had a little bit of money, so you had about 2 or 3 dozen people to join with you to go fight. So you just claimed the title of Major General or whatever, and off you went. And he unfortunately got killed, I think, trying to defend some Yankee prisoners, if I'm not mistaken. And that, but if you're going to get rid of his statue, because you want to get rid of him, then we need to get rid of General Mouton Street and all these other things. But, now I was talking to a lady the other day, talking about the Democrats have now changed the name of their J&J banquet, the Jefferson-Jackson banquet. They now changed it to the True Blue because Jefferson and the other one, Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson, owned slaves. And so talking about getting rid of the hate and such stuff, I thought I agree with you. You ought to get rid of all those symbols. You ought to get rid of every damn one of them, which starts with the Democratic Party and it ends with the Democratic Party. Let's go back and look at all of the racists, all of the real racists who forced those laws, the Jim Crow laws, and all of those who were in charge of lynching, every one of them, right down the road, just about, I'm going to say 99% of them were and still are Democrats.
So, do you think the white nationalists and the Nazis over in Charlottesville are Democrats?
Absolutely. I think they're the same group. Whether they call a Democrat or not, they are the same group as the other side. Both of them want to be totalitarians. They want to run the government. They want a big government. They want to tell us everything we're going to do. It's just the difference is they think they ought to be in charge. What was Hitler? Was Hitler a conservative?
He was a socialist. But remember, David Duke came out and said, Donald Trump, don't forget who got you elected.
Yeah, well,
he can say anything he wants, and he does.
That's right. That doesn't make what he said right.
To Donald Trump.
I mean, if you look at what Donald Trump's voters were, so many of those people were people who had just gotten fed up with the system with both parties who went and voted.
The Democrats still do not have a message for the middle class that they lost. They still don't have a message except we hate Trump. That is their only message. They haven't come back with any kind of economic message that's going to appeal to them. And by the way, one final thing on Alfred Mouton. Yes, he was defending British soldiers that he had captured, and his men wanted to execute.
Yankee soldiers.
I'm sorry, Yankee soldiers. Well, pretty close to it. But anyway, Yankee soldiers that he wanted to execute. And that they wanted to execute, and he would not let them do it. They wanted to line them up in a firing squad, and he defended them. And you know what? A Yankee sniper killed him right then
Probably
and there.
from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, could be.
Probably named Carol Ross.
No, somebody's calling. Should we honor that person and let them jump in on this?
Let him decide on what Stafford comes or goes or is out if he's voted off the island.
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Hey, go ahead, caller, with your comment.
Yes, sir. Well, I think the statue should stay where it is because the families are still viable in this area. And I don't believe that we should be tearing them down because not even 1/10 of the population or 1/12 of the population wants them torn down. And they are even mixed about that. The other thing is that y'all have any information on I-10 to Baton Rouge?
Do we have any information on I-10 to Baton Rouge? I know they're doing some work.
Yeah, I think just that work leading up to the basin.
Yeah. That's the only thing is the construction. No crashes that I know of right now.
Yeah, everything's open then.
Yes, sir.
So,
Let's hope it stays that way.
He
All
just
right,
called,
honey. Thank
He
you.
just called in to get it.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
He just called in to get a traffic
Well, I
report.
was about to say, what he did was the way he paid for it was with a comment on our topic.
I love it.
And then he said, I gave you a comment, so now I want something in return.
That's right. This guy right here is going to want $20.
Okay. All right, let's take one more call before we move on to Trump.
Hello.
Go ahead.
All right, good morning, guys. Carol, this is Ryan, your partner from yesterday afternoon.
Oh, hello, my friend.
How's it going?
Oh, good.
Listen, I want to convey the gentleman's opinion that just called in, too. I mean, when you look at the polls regarding Confederate statues around the country, it's 65 to 70% of the people just say to leave them alone and not tear them down. And, I agree with the gentleman that y'all have in today as well, Mr. Stafford. But at the same time,
Thanks.
when does it stop? You started statues, and he's saying, we still have books. But where does it stop? You start with the statues, and it's a slow eroding of history. So if you want to go down the road that ISIS is doing in the Middle East by tearing down things, erasing history, and just go right ahead and let's just start tearing everything down. But if you're going to tear one side down, then let's take them all down. No statues to anybody.
I think comparing people who want to take the statues down to militant Islamists who are beheading people is disingenuous and extremely inaccurate.
I will say this. We do know who King George is
still. Like
still.
a mob the other night when they were tearing stuff down in the middle of the night, just the people tearing it down. That looked like a bunch of anarchy to me.
Were they executing people with anti-aircraft guns?
No, I'm not making that comparison at all, but I am saying it did look a lot like anarchy to me when they were there in the middle of the night pulling down statues.
And, the one thing I do want to say, too, there are people who think that just because David Duke said, oh, Mr. Trump, remember the people that elected you. There are a lot of people that took offense to that, for example, and, thinking that people would. I wish that dude, I don't wish him harm. I just wish he would disappear. I wish someone would pay him enough money that he would go away, buy him an island,
I wish he wasn't from Louisiana.
Yeah, and could he just disappear?
Yeah. So I think there's a great point about that because, look, I didn't vote for Trump, and
what?
Yeah.
We're shocked.
Were you a Bernie person or a Hillary person?
I was disappointed in my options around the board, But there's a perception out there that liberals think that Trump supporters are racist, and it frustrates me because I don't believe that. I believe that. Look, there's a great quote out there. It's by a comedian. And I don't remember who it is, but not all Trump supporters are racist, right? But most racists are Trump supporters. And so I don't think it's fair to ever.
I take great offense to that, but go ahead.
But he's got his own hill to climb, and I agreed. David Duke can say whatever he wants.
Supporters are racist. I'm gonna have to really think about.
No, I said no. I said most. I said not all racists are Trump, or not all Trump supporters are racist.
But most
racists are Trump supporters. Does that make sense?
No,
not at all.
Okay.
That's why it's winging it. We are winging it.
And I think that's the problem. We all make these overly generic and overly generalized assignations to people that they don't deserve.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Trump.
all right.
You make a comment, then we're going to move on to Trump and Phoenix last night.
The change in the Jefferson banquet and all that stuff to the true blue, blah, blah, blah. And I was talking about the Democratic Party, this woman, and I was talking about all the racists in the Democratic Party, from Woodrow Wilson right on straight up to J. William Fulbright, old man Al Gore Sr., and all of that. She said, well, that's all in the past.
And
really?
Yeah.
So is everything else you're hooping and hollering about that's in the past? You know, is why we got to change everything today. So the Democratic Party, you know,
it's only one past that people want to erase sometimes, and so people forget.
Well, that's the whole point.
I just don't understand how we're ever going to learn if we take stuff away.
Well, the point that Ryan made, first they came for the statues, next they come for the books. They've already hijacked the history of this country, and many of the textbooks that you see being taught today, it's kind of frightening.
Hey, why don't we spend just a couple of minutes, though, finding out about you and what kind of your thoughts are? You know, your age, a little bit of your history, and
so don't be asking profiling questions.
She's profiling you, Stafford.
Yeah. So I'm in my mid-30s, and it's funny. My hardcore liberal friends think I'm a conservative. And my hardcore conservative friends think I'm a liberal.
That's awesome.
The reality is, I don't believe in that the federal government really does much besides its duties of building roads and armies and that type of stuff. And I believe that real change happens locally, right? So I believe in mayors, I believe in council people, I believe in sheriffs.
Well, you must be pretty disappointed these days.
You know, so I think that there's some tough things going on for the mayor right now. I think his biggest problem is that he doesn't communicate it very well or sell on it. We had Joey Durrell who sold everything, right? Who either him or Dee were going out and preaching what they were trying to get done. And then we have a guy who probably has some good ideas, but he's just not spending enough time selling it. So, that being said, I love what's going on locally. I think we've got some challenges that we face. I think we're in a toxic atmosphere when it comes to discussing how we fund government locally.
Well, okay, so that's what I was going to ask you. How do you think we can go about getting together? Because people, oh, that's KPEL. I'm not listening to that. That's old white people. But and that shows you they've never listened to the morning show, number one, right? But then, like you said, half of your friends think you're a total liberal, and the other half think you're a total conservative. So what do we do to get together and have the discussion?
So
in your thought, in your opinion,
I think the biggest problem that we have right now is that we have an us versus them mentality across society, right? And it's Republican versus Democrat, black versus white. It's across the board, right? And I'd like to take a lesson from my brother, right? My brother's a hardcore conservative, and we get into fights on social media on a regular basis.
That's awesome.
Love it. Yes, it's the new family reunion.
It is. He lives in Africa.
Thanksgiving table.
Hey, we don't bring it up in front of family. Okay? But when he comes in,
I know a relative of yours.
Yeah, that makes me nervous. We play golf together and we hang out together and we enjoy each other's company. And I think that not having conversations is what has gotten us to this
agree.
point.
I totally agree.
And so talk to your neighbor, right, and be kind to each other, and realize that nobody's had the same life and that nobody's going to make decisions the same way.
Right.
And be willing to accept criticism. People, look, if you're going to open your mouth and say something, make sure you have some integrity in your argument, first of all. And second of all, if you don't know something, say you don't know. Don't look, we're on Wingin It Wednesday.
Look,
I'm say don't wing it. Right.
Right. But say, hey, I'm not really sure. This is how my gut feels about it. You know, and I'll give you a perfect example. Rob and I were about to interview somebody. And the day before, I was talking to this person and I said, well, what is it that you really don't like about healthcare? I said, okay, well, what specifically? And it was just still rhetoric, right? And then so he goes to get on the air with us the next day and he starts
And by the way, we heard him out for like 25 minutes trying to say, specifically in your life. This all had to do with the Bill Cassidy town hall that happened where there was protests and everything. Yeah. And so we gave someone, half an hour of our time asking, so tell us what is it that you don't, we want to explain it, want to understand it. I'll let you pick up on what happened next.
Just long story short, there were no answers. Yeah. And then when we got on with the person the next morning, Rob almost cut the conversation off before it even started. Yeah. Because the guy then started accusing me.
I hope you treat me better than you treated me on the phone yesterday. Wow. And we were just listening.
And so it's that kind of mentality, like you're saying, on both sides, that has stopped the discussion.
Yes.
And I think it's frustrating to everyone involved.
Anger has become recreational.
Yes.
And there's two backlashes going on, right? We have this social justice warrior thing going on, and you see it in Antifa, and you see the shutdown of free speech on college campuses, and the erosion of free thinking atmospheres on college campuses. And then you have a lot of people like me who are tired of it, who say, hey, look, I don't like what Milo Yiannopoulos has to say or Ann Coulter, but they have the right to say it. And if they want to go out and say inflammatory stuff, which is, I think, how they make their living, go out and do it. And if you say it on college campuses, that's the place to say it, where we encourage you to do things that are outside of the norm. That's how big discoveries are made.
Some folks who consider that inflammatory stuff are actually offended by the truth, and that happens too often also, and they try to shut that down as well, because there's a narrative that's put out. And the history books are written by certain types of people, and sometimes they have an agenda to push. You mentioned Woodrow Wilson, for instance. Many people lionize Woodrow Wilson. He was a eugenicist. He was a friend of Margaret Sanger, who was also a eugenicist. Yes, he jailed the suffragettes. Yes, he had a stroke. His wife practically ran the government. Edith Bowling Galt.
He also invited the Ku Klux Klan to march in Washington with the biggest parade they ever had.
And the Democrats lionized Woodrow Wilson. He was a horrible person.
But that was all in the past.
But he was the president of Princeton. So it was all okay, and he was a Democrat.
But that was all in the past.
So I think
it was. Do we have any statues of Woodrow Wilson around? I want to go tear one of those down.
No, but we do. Don't we have a Woodrow Wilson street?
Yeah.
He jailed the suffragettes. All they wanted was women's right to vote.
Wrap this one up. Kind of the state of the union.
The thing I want to say is Bernie's saying, when do we come together? And my point is, when we come together is when this country starts getting back to work. We're full of frustration. The wages haven't gone up for 30 years, and just that everything bad has grown. The good things, we see diminished by over and over and over, just like in Louisiana. We now have the highest tax rates. We got the highest car insurance rates. We got the highest unemployment. We got the lowest employment. We just have a war on the middle class, the war on people working.
And what's going
to happen when we start coming together, it's going to be the same thing it was in the 1980s, when this country went back to work. In Reagan's 84 commercial, when he said, it's morning again in America, today there will be, 200,000 people will marry. 300,000 will buy their first house today. And he went on and on and on, because this country went back to work and it started working. And all at once, you didn't hear all of these things where people were screaming and hollering about this and that. And when the country is working good, when the economy is growing, when we got something to do, we got something to believe in, then we act like Americans. And when we don't have, that's when the stupidity on all sides comes to a head.
Okay, wrap it up quickly so we can move on.
So I take issue with a lot of that, and I'll tell you why. We have some of the lowest unemployment nationwide that we've seen in a long time. So we can't sit here and let Trump take the credit for the economy and then say we have high unemployment. Now, we have high unemployment in Louisiana based on oil and gas.
Because we have a Democrat governor who passed $2 billion in taxes, and we have nothing to show for it. No better education, no better roads, no better nothing.
So we can talk about supply and demand, which OPEC has increased supply. So has the United States. Domestic oil and gas supply increased higher under Obama than it has under any other president, okay? So we have flooded
the... He could not stop the fracking. He could not stop the fracking. And by the way, check into the real meddling by the Russians, and it was with the Clinton campaign to stop fracking so that Russia could keep their exports high.
So fracking is the market disruptor. Fracking is the market disruptor of the oil and gas industry. And it's going to keep oil at low prices, and it's going to drive down the ability to drill in the Gulf of Mexico. When it costs you $100 million to pop a hole in the ground in the Gulf of Mexico, and it costs you $5 to pop one in West Texas, You're going to drill one in the Gulf or 20 in West Texas.
Why is West Texas any better than Louisiana? We have oil and gas in Louisiana, too, but we're not getting it done because we have a toxic lawsuit atmosphere here. We've got a governor who is enabling plaintiff bounty hunters to go after oil and gas companies.
We're drilling in North Louisiana right now.
Let's wrap this one up because we need to take a quick break.
One final thing, and that is about perception. You didn't know me before you came here. Were you scared to come to Capel because you thought I'd be closed-minded?
Look at him.
No. Look, there's certainly perception about the radio station, right? There isn't a left-leaning syndicated person on the radio at all, right? But there isn't one in Lafayette, as far as I know, right?
And that is about radio and money.
Right.
It's about what sells. Right.
It's not that they haven't tried, Stafford. Air America. I mean, they tried over and over again. They've tried in Baton Rouge, you know.
But you got to remember, we live in a society now where all the world's information is in your pocket.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we can pick what we want to hear.
All I'm saying is there is all this room on KPEL every morning, Monday through Friday, to be able to have a discussion. I hope we can open the gates.
Yeah.
I hope that people don't think one thing because there's one show. Warren, you're hilarious. One show, and because that suddenly is representative of every person that works here.
Well, that's why we do Wingin It Wednesday.
Absolutely.
It's a perfect reason to kind of open up the lens.
We press the button and anybody can call.
And the station has made that commitment to more local programming to be able to get more voices on.
But I will tell you, because of what people perceive sometimes, they'll say, I'm not going on that radio station. And they miss this huge opportunity.
Right.
So just, food for thought. So glad you're here.
Thank you.
We are happy you're here, man.
I hope we get to learn more about you. I find it fascinating that your brother is like one way politically, you're kind of a different way politically, and y'all still have that conversation.
Look, so much has happened in the last couple of days that, we had a list of topics, but I love Wingin It Wednesday. We have all kinds of stuff we want to get to. We will. You know what?
You all right?
I'm going to add, let's see, what do we have? At 8:10, we do have Jeff Manasso coming up. You know what? I might do a Wingin It Wednesday extra segment today.
What you doing later?
Would y'all be down to stay until 8:10?
I'm free.
Okay, so I know Carol Ross probably has to go teach a Zumba class or something.
Oh, what time you got to go to
Anyway, all this to say, we have a couple more things we still want to get to. I want to talk about Trump. We have about 6 minutes left in the hour. Last night, the big... they call it a campaign-style rally, and then I saw some questions yesterday afternoon. Why do we call it campaign-style? It's a campaign rally. It's what it seems like it is.
But he's already elected, so it's just a campaign style.
But is it not campaigning for the next election year? Warren, a lot of people are writing today about the tale of two Trumps. You had the Monday night Trump on Prompter. Even his biggest critics liked some of the things he said. Then you had last night. Which one is it?
I didn't watch last night, but I'm going to tell you this. It's always a campaign. From the day they get elected, they got a campaign to keep going. But it's also it's part of life. If you're up there running the show, then it's a constant job. I mean, it's 24/7. You got to be communicating with people. And so communicating with people, you're also campaigning. Whatever you say is going to be taken different ways. So, I mean, I don't see that there's any real problem with it, but I do want to point out something about the speech he gave the other night. I've been waiting for that speech for right at 30 years. Right at 30 years. The two things he said in there that I completely and totally agree with. I was opposed to going to war in Iraq. Absolutely. But Douglas MacArthur said, in war, there can be no substitute for victory. And Donald Trump either read some of my writings, or he's listened to this show, or his
people,
don't even get me started on the conspiracy.
Or the people around him have listened to it and told him, or he is just really that smart. And I think it's probably the latter. But the big thing about it was that he said, we have to define victory. That's exactly what I said in that National Geographic documentary Inside the Vietnam War. I said, if you're going to release the military to go into harm's way, you're not defining their mission. You're not defining their mission. You're not defining victory, but you just tell them, go out there and kill some people. It makes absolutely no sense. And what he said, we have to define the mission, and we have to define victory. And then he said the thing that really made more sense. was that we have to change and have some common sense rules of engagement. You know, one of those generals who lost his job over there because he had an interview that came out in Rolling Stone magazine. I forgot which one it was now, but it said Crystal. That's right. It said he was talking with a bunch of the soldiers, and one of the things they kept coming up was, when are we supposed to shoot? Now, by God, if you got people out there getting shot at, and they've got to turn around and got to ask you, when can I shoot? This is honest God true story.
You're just sending
this
people
is
to
honest
be
to God true stories. I heard an MP in Saigon call in and said there was a person, a Victor Charlie, approaching him with an AK-47, and I request permission to shoot. Car 1 Waco called back, which was the duty officer, which was the officer of the day, called back and said, do not fire. He said, we're in route or something. And so the consorts were the local police, and they called them the white mice. They were absolutely worthless. They would either join the side of the Viet Cong or they would run anytime something happened. And so just about 30 seconds later, this guy comes back on the radio, Waco Static Post 6-4, request blah, 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 whatever it was. They had a body in the street that was shot. And he said it was, of course, was the Viet Cong, the Victor Charlie. He said, so the duty officer gets on the radio and said, did you shoot? And he said, no, sir, a consort did. And everybody, of course, knew that wasn't the case. And everybody on the radio started screaming.
So are we
good job.
Are we set up better now for Afghanistan?
What?
Are we in a better spot now for what the direction is there?
Well, who knows?
Yes, I think we're in a better spot that if we follow through on some of this stuff than what we were. We're
in a better spot than letting the politicians run the war.
That's right,
he's going to let the generals
and you stir up all this stuff, and then you just back off and just let happen what happened. And then if you pull the trigger at the wrong time, they're going to send you to prison. And one thing, you can't blame it all on Obama. This has been going on since Korea. But they turn around, and under Carol's buddy, George W. Bush, who let people go to prison.
You just are obsessed with the Bushes.
That was wrong. They went to prison for taking
and
pictures.
I've given him hell for the wrong things that he did. Yes, I'd have. The other thing that win was the word. That's the word I wanted to hear. Win. How to get there, etc. But the other thing was that we were not going to be nation building. We're going to be killing terrorists. Period.
So you guys both...
They will rebuild their own nation with our help, but they'll rebuild their own nation, and that's the way it has to be. But the other thing that was really encouraging, because what I had said on the show before the speech was that I thought he had to definitely bring in more of the Middle East to solve their own problem. You know, it cannot come from the outside. They're so tribal.
The reason it ends up coming in from the outside is because of how many people are
if you're not in their family, if you're not in their tribe, if you're not part of their area, their tribal area, they hate you. So the thing is, you have to bring in those partners. But the really critical thing was getting India and Pakistan, who hate each other, but the fact that India was seriously brought into this equation. And why are we in Afghanistan? And I heard a really good comment the other night, because we need to keep an eye on Pakistan.
So, Stafford, they both talked about the highlights from the Monday night speech. Was any of the advancement in the Monday night speech erased with what happened last night?
100%. 100%. Look, I think my favorite part of last night's rally was when Trump was hammering the media and said they'll never show the size of the crowd, while the camera was literally panned out showing the size of the crowd, right? It's the same rhetoric. The transcripts of Trump's phone call with the president of Mexico were leaked about a month ago. I don't know if you remember that or not. And one of the things that was on there was the president of Mexico saying, we've had this discussion before. We are not paying for a wall. You and I have agreed that the best wall that can be built between the United States and Mexico is a strong economy in Mexico that disincentivizes people to cross the border. And he said, you're right, but I can't let that get public. Okay, so there are two Trumps. There, the Trump that goes out and campaigns for president in 2017, which I can tell you, as a 36-year-old guy, the campaigning gets old. The mayor of Phoenix asked him to not come. The local congressmen were not there. There were two or three. John McCain wasn't there, and neither was the other guy, and neither was the. I don't know the other congressman. The congressman the Republican congressman that Trump is personally trying to find a Republican to run against him. And I don't know if you'll know this either. after the rally, the police had to disperse the crowd with tear gas, okay? And we almost had another repeat of Charlottesville with somebody giving Hitler salutes out of a truck. And thank goodness the police intervened to kind of get these guys out of the vehicle and stop, because the protesters were gathering around them. So it's frustrating to see that we have a president that can't immediately come out and say, hey, this stuff is wrong and we shouldn't support it. And
what was wrong with what he said the first time? He said, because he didn't specifically name names of groups and their names, he said it was wrong. The very first time he said it was wrong. But then people are going to pick that apart.
Yeah,
man, I think y'all think that secretly he goes, y'all, listen to me, generalizing. I think some groups of people think that this guy goes inside and sits down at his table that has an SS flag on it.
Right.
He said it was wrong. But
his
because
son-in-law is Jewish. He has close ties with Israel.
His daughter's Jewish.
When is it... that's why in my opinion, having been in this business as long as I have, I think there is a lot of truth to, it doesn't matter what he says. They're going to make him, he does his wacky stuff anyway. But even if he didn't, even from the beginning, they try to portray him as this wacky nut and he's all crazy and it's all this. And it was never, there's some part of it that was never going to be enough. So what was wrong with what he said the first time? Why was that not enough? I mean, tell me, because you're listening to it, and you're like, what is it that didn't resonate for you?
I think that what he said the first time was not the big issue, right? When he came out and he didn't specifically condemn the white nationalists and the Nazis that were there.
But he condemned hate.
He did. He did. The problem was when he came along and said, there's good guys on both sides.
Did you see the people who had weapons?
Yeah, I watched it too.
And the whole crowd?
Yeah.
Of all of the people, that there were some people?
They all had weapons.
Both sides, yeah.
Then what's wrong with saying that?
And I think you can put the worst interpretation on it or the best interpretation. I think the interpretation I had was there are good people who are for removing the monuments and good people on the side who don't want to remove.
The monuments was a ruse. Okay, make it clear. The guy who put this whole thing together,
the blogger did call it a pro-white rally before even talking about the monuments.
Deleted his Twitter account yesterday because he got on Twitter and he called the woman who died a fat communist that deserved to die.
He's a nutball.
Right? That's crazy. Not Trump.
When somebody, I didn't say it was Trump. When somebody shows you who they are, believe them. Okay, this was a white nationalist rally. This was not a rally to protect the monument. That was the ruse.
But when you say that you want to participate in the American system, you do not show up at a rally with a weapon.
So the militia guys with ARs
are stupid idiots.
And they had a vigil the night before.
Are they the good guys?
Not violent.
No, they're not good guys.
Okay, so who are the good guys? Was it the Nazi sympathizers or the white supremacists or the?
There were no good guys.
The good guys were the ones who stayed home.
I think that's everybody's point.
Okay, but don't think that just because we work at this radio station and maybe somebody has an R behind their name when they vote, that they think that. That's what I'm saying. I think there are some in the media that criticize people and because we say, maybe you're too critical. Maybe it's not this. The man said hate was wrong, that it was wrong.
Yeah.
So,
Bernie, most of the people who have actually caused a lot of hurt and harm and all that, they were on the Democrat side. The guy who tried to kill his congressman, they were Democrats.
But does it even matter? Because it was both sides.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying.
You may, Warren. Hold on, Carol. Wrap this one up for us, Warren. We're going to have one more segment, by the way.
I'm so sick and tired of hearing this deal about the white supremacists and all that stuff. But I want to ask the question, who are the white supremacists? And I'm going to say this, that when I was growing up in the First Baptist Church in Fairburn, Georgia, I was taught from a very early age that God had one group of people that were his chosen people. And that's who that we looked at to be actually the supreme race of people, and that was the Jews. And then at the Pleasant Hill Missionary Baptist Church, Route 1, Martin, Tennessee, I was told over and over and over again that the Jews were God's chosen people, and the Jews are white. So does that make everybody who believes that white supremacists? And we also have people who are black supremacists, because I have a lot of friends who will sit there and tell you that black people are innately more qualified for athletics, for sports, and for all of these things. They're just better. It's biologically that they are better. Does that make them black supremacists? You have people out there who will say the Asians are smarter than we are. Most of the Americans, blacks, whites, Latinos, or whatever. All of these big companies are going out there and doing everything they can to hire these Asian engineers and such stuff. Does that make them Asian supremacists? I don't know. I'm going to tell you this. I think that what we need to do is we need to concentrate on trying to get rid of labels, get rid of race, and let's just settle down and let's just be all brothers and sisters in humanity.
We have to wrap up this conversation and continue it.
The rally, because we really have to. The rally should not have happened when those people showed up, when the white supremacists showed up, and they had shields on, and they had that clothing that was like, to protect you from getting beat up. At that point, why didn't the mayor of that town and the police chief come together and say, if somebody thinks they're going to get beaten up and killed, and they bring a shield, that's done. That's not free speech.
What was going to happen.
The permits were canceled.
Yeah.
So they attempted to.
So should and then you kind of ask, so should the disbursement measures have happened then?
Absolutely.
And the argument could probably be made that is when you should have done it. If one side showed up expecting the violence, the violence was innately going to happen.
Well, and Doug McKelway was right there saying that he heard the police saying, we're being called back.
Okay.
Back off.
That was
back off.
That was awful.
Guys, this is awesome what we do, and we're going to continue this conversation.
Okay, we're going to continue next
week. We're going to
only if Stafford says he's coming back.
Well, no, are you sure you can come back? I think he can handle it. He showed up with his chainmail and his shield and everything ready. So
bruised and battered.
All right, thanks. We've reached the top of the hour. Wingin' It Wednesday brought to you each and every week by Service Chevrolet Cadillac. Appreciate you guys, of course, as always.